Welcome to Bears News Fan Report, your trusted source for everything Chicago Bears, where I bring you the latest updates, draft analysis, and strategic insights that matter most to us as fans of this storied franchise. I'm here today because something just dropped that has massive implications not just for one of our divisional rivals, but for how we need to be thinking about building this roster moving forward into the 2026 draft cycle. And trust me, what I'm about to share with you changes the conversation entirely about how the NFC landscape is shaping up. The 2026 NFL Draft is still months away, but the chess pieces are already moving into position. Teams across the league are making calculated decisions about which positions deserve premium draft capital. And there's a fascinating split happening right now between organizations chasing franchise quarterbacks and those loading up on elite talent at other premium positions. I've been studying the latest projections, analyzing team needs across the conference, and tracking how certain positional trends are emerging that could fundamentally alter draft strategies. What caught my attention isn't just one pick or one player, it's what that selection represents about where the league is heading and what it means for teams like ours that are trying to build championship rosters in an increasingly competitive NFC. Let me take you inside what's happening right now in draft circles. The first round of this projected 2026 class is absolutely loaded with defensive talent and offensive playmakers, and teams are getting aggressive about securing cornerstone pieces. We're seeing trades at the top for quarterbacks, which we expected, but the real story is playing out in the middle of the first round, where teams are identifying specific skill sets they believe can transform their offenses. And one position in particular is getting a level of respect in draft capital that tells us everything about how modern NFL offenses are evolving. Think about how the tight end position has changed over the past decade. We've gone from traditional blocking tight ends who occasionally caught passes to athletic receiving weapons who create matchup nightmares for defenses. The elite tight ends in today's game, the Travis Kelce types, the George Kittle types, they're not just complementary pieces, they're offensive focal points who command double teams and force defensive coordinators to make impossible choices. If you cover them with a linebacker, they run past him. If you cover them with a safety, they use their size to create separation. This evolution has made the position incredibly valuable, and smart organizations are recognizing that investing early draft capital into elite tight end prospects can pay dividends for years. Now here's where this gets interesting for us as Bears fans. One of the teams in our conference just made a statement about how seriously they're taking this positional value. I'm talking about a franchise that's been consistently competitive, that understands offensive identity, and that just signaled they're willing to use a first-round pick to secure a tight end who fits the modern prototype perfectly. And the player they're targeting in this projection has all the traits that make evaluators fall in love with the position's potential. Tampa Bay, sitting at pick 19 in this latest 2026 mock draft, is projected to select Kenyon Sadiq, a tight end out of Oregon. Before you ask why a Bears channel is talking about a Bucs draft pick, let me explain why this matters tremendously for how we should be evaluating our own roster construction and draft strategy. Sadiq represents everything about where the tight end position is headed, and if Tampa Bay lands him, it fundamentally changes the offensive dynamics in the NFC and forces us to think differently about our defensive matchup problems. Let me paint the picture of who Kenyon Sadiq is and why he's generating first-round buzz. This is a 6'5", 245-pound athlete who can stretch the field vertically, create separation in the intermediate zones, and dominate in the red zone where size and body control become paramount. During his time at Oregon, Sadiq showed the kind of route-running refinement you typically don't see from college tight ends, the ability to sink his hips and create leverage against defensive backs, and the hands to make contested catches in traffic. He's not just a receiving threat either. He's fundamentally sound as a blocker. which means he can stay on the field in all situations and doesn't telegraph offensive intentions based on personnel groupings. What makes Sadiq particularly intriguing for an offense like Tampa Bay's is his versatility. He can align inline and execute traditional tight end responsibilities. He can motion into the slot and create matchup problems against linebackers or safeties, and he can split out wide and force defenses to respect his ability to win on the outside. This kind of positional flexibility is exactly what modern offensive coordinators crave, because it allows them to disguise intentions, create formation advantages, and stress defensive game plans. If the Bucs are genuinely targeting someone with Sadiq's skill set in the first round, they're betting that this type of player can be a foundational piece for their offensive identity moving forward. Let's talk about fit and context. Tampa Bay has historically valued the tight end position, and with question marks about their long-term situation at that spot, using premium draft capital to secure a potential decade-long solution makes strategic sense. Sadiq would immediately provide quarterback stability regardless of who's under center, because tight ends who can win at all three levels of the field are security blankets for young passers and weapons for veterans. He'd give their offense the kind of matchup advantage that forces defenses into difficult decisions every single snap. But here's what really matters to us as Bears fans. If Tampa Bay invests a first-round pick into a player like Sadiq, that changes our defensive preparation when we face them. Suddenly, we're dealing with an offense that has a legitimate receiving threat at tight end who can exploit the middle of the field, attack our linebackers in coverage, and create red zone problems that require specific game planning. This is the kind of addition that elevates an entire offensive unit. And when teams in your conference make these kinds of moves, you have to respond accordingly. Now, let me connect this back to our situation in Chicago. The Bears are projected to pick at 25 in this mock, and we're reportedly targeting Romello Height, an edge rusher from Texas Tech. That's a need-based pick that makes sense given our desire to generate consistent pass rush, but watching how other teams in the NFC are building their rosters should inform our own strategic thinking. If our rivals are investing in elite receiving weapons and offensive playmakers, we need to ensure our defense has the personnel to counter those threats. That means having linebackers who can cover in space, safeties who can handle athletic tight ends, and a pass rush that doesn't give opposing quarterbacks time to find these mismatches. The broader lesson here is about positional value and draft strategy. Tampa Bay potentially using the 19th overall pick on a tight end tells us that organizations are rethinking traditional draft hierarchies. There was a time when tight ends rarely went in the first round unless they were generational prospects. Now, we're seeing teams recognize that elite players at that position can be worth the investment, especially when they bring the kind of versatility and athleticism that fits modern offensive systems. This shift should influence how we think about our own draft approach. Are there positions we've been undervaluing that could provide disproportionate impact? Are we being creative enough in how we're identifying players who can fill multiple roles and create scheme advantages? I also want to address the elephant in the room. Draft projections are just that, projections. We're months away from the actual 2026 draft, and player evaluations will shift as we get closer to draft day. But these early mocks are valuable because they show us how evaluators are currently viewing positional value, team needs, and player rankings. Even if Tampa Bay doesn't ultimately select Sadiq at 19, the fact that he's being projected there tells us he's considered a first-round caliber talent, and someone will invest that capital into securing him. From a Bears perspective, I'm watching these developments with interest because they inform our own draft strategy and roster construction. If teams around the league are getting more aggressive about securing elite tight ends, should we be thinking about investing in that position ourselves? Our tight end room has been functional, but not necessarily a difference maker. And if the position is evolving into something more central to offensive success, that's a conversation worth having. At the same time, we can't chase every trend or try to copy what every other successful team is doing. We need to identify our own offensive identity, determine which positions are most critical to executing that vision, and draft accordingly. The 2026 class is shaping up to be fascinating because of how teams are approaching positional value. Quarterbacks are going early as expected, but after those first few picks, we're seeing a real diversity in team-building philosophies. Some organizations are loading up on defensive playmakers, others are investing in offensive line talent, and teams like Tampa Bay are potentially targeting receiving weapons who can create systematic advantages. For the Bears, sitting at 25, we'll have options, and understanding how the board falls ahead of us will be critical to maximizing value. One final thought before I get your take on all this. Watching how other teams in our conference build their rosters should make us better evaluators of our own situation. If Tampa Bay lands Sadiq and turns him into a legitimate offensive weapon, that's information we can use to assess our defensive needs and matchup concerns. If other teams are investing in elite receiving talent, we need elite coverage defenders. If opponents are building powerful offensive lines, we need disruptive defensive linemen. Championship teams don't just draft well, they draft strategically with an understanding of what they'll be facing twice a year in divisional games and throughout the conference. So here's what I want from you in the comments. Do you think Tampa Bay taking a tight end at 19 makes sense given their roster needs? How would you feel about the Bears potentially targeting a tight end in next year's draft if an elite prospect is available? And more broadly, what positions do you think we should prioritize as we head into the 2026 draft? I genuinely want to hear your perspectives because that's what makes this community so valuable. We can analyze these situations together and think critically about how our team should be approaching roster construction. Before you head out, make sure you're subscribed to Bears News Fan Report and hit that notification bell so you never miss breaking news, draft analysis, or strategic insights about our beloved Chicago Bears. Like this video if you found the analysis valuable, share it with your fellow Bears fans, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm bringing you content every single day that treats you like the informed, passionate fan you are. So stick around, because we've got plenty more draft coverage coming as we get closer to 2026. This is your home for real Bears analysis, and I'll see you in the next one. Bear down.